On a Prayer, Faith is Awaken by Elton Thomas. Episode 9, News of Hope. The newsroom buzzed with the frenetic energy that came just before the evening broadcast. Phones rang off the hook, people shouted across desks, and the rapid clacking of keyboards provided a constant undercurrent of sound. Bright overhead lights cast a harsh glow on the polished desks and computer screens, making the space feel sterile and hurried. Amid the chaos, Megan Lee sat at her desk, hunched over her computer, her sharp brown eyes scanning the latest report. Her desk was cluttered with papers, notes scribbled in the margins with arrows pointing in every direction, connecting names and locations. A half-empty cup of cold coffee sat forgotten beside her keyboard, the remnants of her 5th cup that day. She tapped her pen anxiously against the desk, her mind racing as she pieced together the narrative she was about to deliver on air. Megan had always been relentless. Her reputation as a hard-nosed reporter came from her refusal to accept things at face value. She dug deeper, always searching for the truth that others missed or ignored. But lately, the stories she had been covering weighed heavier than usual. Human trafficking, missing children, and the unspoken horrors lurking in the shadows of her city. These weren't just stories to her. They were nightmares that seeped into her thoughts at night, robbing her of sleep. Tonight's broadcast was different. This time, the story was personal. Her thoughts turned to Dusty Rhymes, the investigator she had been quietly working with over the last few days. Their conversations had been brief and to the point, exchanging information, following leads, sharing what little they had, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were both chasing the same thing, the truth about Mila Suero, the 8-year-old girl who had vanished without a trace. Megan's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed out the final lines of her script, her heart heavy with the weight of the task ahead. The faces of missing children had flashed across her screen too many times, each one a reminder of the darkness she fought against. But this time, something felt different. This time, she had hope. The newsroom fell into a brief lull as the clock ticked closer to airtime. Megan leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she closed her eyes for just a moment, trying to ease the tension that had settled behind her eyes. Her pulse was steady, but her mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts, leads, dead ends, and the lingering fear that they were running out of time. 5 minutes until we're live, someone called from across the room, jolting Megan from her thoughts. She took a deep breath and straightened up, her fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Her reflection in the dark screen of her monitor stared back at her, tired but determined. She was good at this. She knew how to tell a story, how to get people to care. But tonight wasn't about ratings or awards. It was about finding Mila. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her attention. She picked it up, glancing at the screen. A message from Dusty. Found a lead. Be careful. These people don't mess around. Megan's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. She quickly typed a response. I will. Let me know if you need anything. She didn't know if it was relief or fear that surged through her as she put the phone down. Dusty was out there, in the middle of it, while she was here, trying to piece together the story from the safety of her desk. There was a part of her that wished she could do more, that she could be out there with him, chasing down the same leads, but she knew her role. She could shine a light on the story, make people care, and that was just as important. The director signaled from across the room, and Megan stood up, smoothing her blouse and straightening the lapel of her blazer. She grabbed her papers and made her way to the studio, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. The familiar buzz of anticipation coursed through her veins as she approached the anchor desk, but it was tempered with the weight of the story she was about to tell. As she sat down under the bright studio lights, the director's voice crackled through her earpiece. We're live in 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on, and Megan's expression transformed into one of calm authority. The studio around her faded into the background as she focused on the camera lens, addressing the thousands of viewers watching from their homes. Good evening. I'm Megan Lee, and tonight we bring you a story that hits close to home, a story of hope, but also of the grim realities we face in our own backyard. Her voice was steady, but underneath, there was a subtle intensity that conveyed the gravity of what she was about to say. 8-year-old Mila Suero has been missing for over 72 hours. Her disappearance has raised alarm across the city as law enforcement and private investigators work tirelessly to bring her home. But tonight, we're not just here to report another missing person, we're here to ask for your help. Megan paused, letting her words sink in. She knew how to pace a broadcast, how to use silence to emphasize the weight of a story. The image of Mila's face appeared on the screen beside her, those wide, innocent eyes that seemed to stare directly into the camera. "This is Mila," Megan continued, her voice softening. "She was last seen in the south side of St. Louis, just blocks away from her home. Since then, there's been no trace of her. But we believe someone knows something. Someone out there may have seen something that can help us bring Mila back to her family." Her eyes glistened under the studio lights, though she fought to keep her emotions in check. This was the hardest part of her job, holding back the flood of emotions that came with telling stories like this. But she couldn't afford to break. Not now. "Earlier today," Megan said, her tone growing more urgent, "Private investigator Dusty Rhymes, who has been working tirelessly on this case, uncovered new leads that suggest Mila may still be in the city. We need your help to bring her home. If you have any information, anything at all, please call the tip line displayed on your screen." The phone number flashed beneath Mila's image, and Megan hoped that somewhere, someone watching would pick up the phone and dial it. "We're not giving up," Megan said firmly, her eyes locking onto the camera. "And neither should you." The camera shifted back to her, and she wrapped up the segment with the practiced ease of a seasoned reporter. But inside, her heart was pounding. She had done this 100 times before, pleaded with the public to help in the search for missing children, to come forward with information. But this time, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. As the red light blinked off, signaling the end of the broadcast, Megan let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The weight of the story settled back onto her shoulders, heavier than before. She stood up from the anchor desk, handing off her notes to a producer as she made her way back to her office. The newsroom was quieter now, the energy from earlier replaced with a somber lull. People were still working, but there was a heaviness in the air, as if everyone felt the same weight that Megan carried. She sat back down at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She pulled up her email, checking for any updates on Mila's case. Nothing yet. The silence from her inbox only added to the growing sense of unease in her chest. Her phone buzzed again, and Megan's pulse quickened. She grabbed it, hoping for an update from Dusty, but it wasn't Dusty. It was her boss, the station manager, a man known for his bluntness. "Nice work tonight. Keep the pressure on." Megan put the phone down with a sigh, her frustration simmering just beneath the surface. She knew the broadcast had been important, but it didn't feel like enough. Dusty was out there, risking his life to find Mila, and all Megan could do was sit behind a desk and talk. She stood up abruptly, her chair rolling back with a soft thud as she grabbed her coat and headed for the door. She needed to clear her head, needed to do something other than stare at a screen and wait for someone else to make a move. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her, refreshing and sharp. The city stretched out before her, the lights of St. Louis twinkling in the distance. Megan took a deep breath, her gaze drifting toward the skyline, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that somewhere, someone had seen Mila, that they were one step closer to bringing her home. But even as she stood there, her heart heavy with the weight of the unknown, she couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. And somewhere, Dusty was in the eye of it.